People often talk about entry or beginner level painting like it's something to apologise for. It isn't, and today I want to show you why. Hello and welcome to this first video in a short series where I'll take the same Space Marine model from sprue to entry level painting standard through to a good tabletop standard and eventually a competition standard whilst discussing what changes are important at each stage. So, what is entry or beginner level painting standards? For me, entry level is nothing to be ashamed of, nor is it something to be mocked in others. Not only is it a recognised painting standard, but it's also a dating point for future development if desired. As such, we'll be focusing on three things in today's video: clean fundamentals, clear readability at arm's length, and a minimal wasted effort. With all that in mind, let's also consider that we're not rushing and that everything we do is intentional. Okay, enough of that, let's crack on with the model. Properly preparing a model is important, as poor preparation can very easily change the physical texture on the surface of the model. When utilising techniques like dry brushing, these imperfections are highlighted and can ruin the appearance of the model instantly. So firstly, we're going to clean the model. What we mean is we're going to thoughtfully remove the model parts from the sprue and then remove the mould lines, burrs and imperfections before we apply any paint. Your requirements or endgame vision for your project will dictate to what extent you clean your models, but as the theme of this series is to take the same model from entry or beginner level through to competition standard, I'll be taking those few extra minutes at this stage to remove those stubborn mould lines. Plus, it's just good practice. You'll notice the video is whizzing through, as I'll likely cover model prep in more detail in another video. As you can now see, I've applied an undercoat of black primer, specifically Colourforge's matte black spray. Unless I'm painting something white or yellow, etc., I'll almost always use black when priming models, as I find it more forgiving when applying the base coat, and it can give the model a slightly darker appearance than if I were to undercoat with white or grey. Next up is the base layer, for which I'm using Citadel's Mephiston Red to paint the iconic red armour. You'll notice that I'm not trying to be neat here. The red is being applied to read even and consistent, but be applied quickly using a rather aged Citadel medium base brush. At this stage, a flat colour matters more than character. Yes, I'm aware this brush looks like it got a little cocky with Anthony Joshua on Twitter or something, but it's been my go-to for this kind of quick base laying for years. Once I've added a sufficient number of thin, even coats of Mephiston Red to give us our even coverage without sacrificing detail, I'm going to return everything that's not supposed to be red to black using Citadel's Abaddon Black. As I'm personally a bit of a stickler for law and uniformity, we're going to assign this chap as a sergeant of the 5th Squad in the Blood Angels' 2nd Company. To represent his rank of sergeant, we just colour the inlays of his shoulder pauldrons black. To denote his squad assignment, we'll paint his right knee pad black, and later we'll add the white X across it. The Blood Angels' chest aquila will be black also. So, as the video is whizzing along in the background and we have a couple of minutes, let's talk about the why regarding this mini-series. Putting it simply, I want to see how easy it would be to start off with a simplistic paint job that with a number of tweaks you could present at a lower to mid-range painting competition. Let's add a scenario. You've just gotten your first starter or combat patrol set for Christmas or your birthday, and you know you want to end up with an army sporting a painting standard that you'll be able to look at and go, yeah, I'm pretty chuffed with that, go me! But you've never painted with anything more than your fingers when you were 5, and you don't want to mess it up. I want to prove that doing your army in stages is possible and will never look bad, regardless of what stage or painting ability you're at. Just regarding the competition label that I've added to this series, whilst we're only at the first stage, I don't anticipate the result by the end of the third video will be eligible for a Golden Demon trophy. However, I think it would do well in some regional competitions. If there's another chapter you think would benefit the series, by all means stick it in the comments. Here we are, everything that's not supposed to be red has been reblocked with black and is now awaiting a detail colour. As you can see, it's not very tidy, don't worry, we'll rectify that towards the end. Now onto the detail base coats. For the weapon, Blood Angel's weapon casings are black, but weapon details like the flash hider magazine, more exposed parts of the receiver and working parts are all steel. For this, I'll be using Vallejo's chainmail silver. However, any darkish silver will be fine. Citadel's lead belcher is a common favourite. For the gold details, I'm using Citadel's Retributor armour. Now I've blocked in the colours on the weapon, it's on to the other details on the model. For the ammunition pouches etc, I'm giving them a layer of Citadel's Mournfang Brown. The eye lenses get a very patient pass in Citadel's Warpstone Glow. Any litany scrolls or other bits of paper hanging off him will be getting a layer of Mournfang Brown ahead of a couple of layers of Citadel's Moorcast Bone. Whilst the wax stamps that hold the litany scrolls in place are normally red, I'll be doing this one in Warpstone Glow as the green contrasts better against the red armour. So, again with the video whizzing away in the background, let's talk about the Blood Angels. The Blood Angels are one of the original 20 founding Space Marine legions, more specifically the 9th Legion. Their Primarch was Sanguinius up until the point he got smushed by Horus, but that was before he opened up a chink in the War Master's armour which allowed the Emperor to defeat him. So you could say the Imperium owes him a cuddle or something. There's no dancing around it, the Blood Angels are pretty much full-blown vampires. A flaw in their gene seed makes them crave blood, occasionally to the point of going all 30 days of night on whatever unfortunate creatures happen to be in arm's reach. They, for the most part, follow the Codex Astartes and are infamous for fielding close combat troops and utilising shock assault tactics to overwhelm their enemies quickly. I would imagine this is so the feast can commence all the sooner. Their homeworld is Baal, which more recently in the lore was almost destroyed by this month's big bad threat to the galaxy, Hive Fleet Leviathan. The world was only saved by the stoic defence of the Blood Angels and the successor chapters that came to their aid. My favourite little factoid about the Blood Angels and their successors is that they dedicate an entire company to those brothers that have succumbed to the Black Rage, which is basically where they cannot refrain from going all psycho and numbing anything with a pulse. So they just clad them in black armour, point them at the enemy and say, "Have fun, chaps, have fun." However, our man here is still adorned in red, so he's only partially psychotic. Speaking of which, let's get back to the video. Lastly, in our layering phase, I'm adding a coat of Citadel's Eshin Grey to the base. Fortunately, this model comes with a scenic base as standard, meaning I don't need to add any textured paint this time. Before we move to the last two phases, which will be most important in regard to adding readability to the model, we can now go back and rectify any mistakes we've made. Whether you're new to miniature painting or a seasoned professional, you cannot be afraid to make mistakes. If you're anything like me, rectifying and learning from mistakes is where I learn the most. As long as your paint is thin enough, you can always rectify those moments where your brush slips or you're working more ham-fisted to save time. In that I mean, if your brush slips and a bit of black ends up with the red, really do not stress about it. In fact, my advice to you is expect it to happen. This can have subconscious effects where you don't beat yourself up for being imperfect. Just go back over with a bit of red and paint over it. At the end of the day, if you're not making mistakes, you're probably not learning. If you're not learning, you're not improving, and therefore not progressing as an artist. And here we have our Blood Angel with all the colours blocked in, ignoring the rogue gold mishap on the bolt rifle. Whilst yes, it's nothing that'll make your jaw drop, it is perfectly acceptable basic tabletop completion standard. This level is tournament legal and will earn you those coveted points for having a painted army. However, the readability isn't great. What we mean is, a Space Marine model is made up of a series of shapes, almost exclusively spheres and cylinders, with the occasional combination of the two. Whilst we're not delving into shapes too much in this video, it would be good to highlight the varying armoured plates to increase readability. We will do this in two simple ways, shading and highlighting. For the purposes of this video, we're going to think about two different shading techniques, washes and recess shading. A wash is largely what it sounds like. We're going to apply a greater volume of our shade paint onto an area. In this example, we want to emphasise the shapes over uneven areas, like the rugged terrain of the base, and to make the steel parts look a little dulled and industrial. We'll also be applying a wash onto the gold iconography of the rifle and litany scrolls, just on a much smaller scale. For both the wash over the steel parts and the recess shading, I'm using Citadel's Nuln Oil. For the gold detail on the scrolls, I'm using Citadel's Reichland Flesh Shade. Recess shading, so we take a smaller amount of our shade paint and localise its distribution into the recesses of the model instead of over an area. This carries the sole purpose of adding physical depth to certain parts we want to darken. When we do this in between armour plates, it confirms to the eye that the armour is made up of multiple pieces. And here is our freshly shaded model. However, it's still a little scruffy, and whilst the addition of the recess shading has helped, we can now add highlights to further increase readability. Next up is highlights. For simplicity, we're just going to use a single edge highlight. For full disclosure, the footage you're watching here is me applying a highlight of Citadel's Evil Sunz Scarlett, which is normally a good colour for edge highlighting Mephiston Red. However, in post-production of this video, you couldn't tell the difference between that and the base colour. So I went over the highlights again with Citadel's Wild Rider Red, which is actually closer to an orange than red, but meh. Anywho, back to the lesson. Something to consider with edge highlighting is that our aim is to guide the paintbrush so the result is a nice, defined line that runs parallel to the edge of the armour plate. Ideally, we'd like to avoid a line that differs in width along the way. Like everything else, this is a skill that has to be learned, so please be kind to yourself if you don't nail it right away. Have patience and just keep practicing. Also keep in mind that at this level, it isn't about complicated techniques or finesse, it's about definition and readability. Mostly utilising the side of the brush, I'm just picking out the uppermost or more exposed edges of the armour. It's very tempting to highlight every single edge of armour segment, however this can add unnecessary volume of detail which can confuse the eye and actually detract away from readability, especially if the highlight is considerably brighter than the base colour. Black details, including the weapon casing, armour joints and the chest aquila, we're again going to bring attention to the uppermost edges using Citadel's Dark Reaper. This is a great colour which adds a slight bluish hue to the black which gives it a cleaner appearance over using a grey tone. By all means, take this time towards the end to tidy any mistakes. For this level of painting, don't feel the need to add more details or fancy eye grabbers. Details are where a lot of entry-level paint jobs succeed or fail, not because they're complex, but because they're rushed. Clean edges do more work than extra techniques ever will, especially for a tabletop army. As such, keep your detail work simplistic. And here we are, our completed entry-level or basic tabletop standard Blood Angel's Intercessor. At this point, I'd happily put this on the table. It's readable, consistent and honest. What it isn't is overly refined, and that's deliberate. The aim of today was a clean paint job done relatively quickly. Actual brush time on this model is about 2 to 3 hours. That might sound long, but if you do a production line of 5 or so squad mates, the overall time will be minimal. If you need further reassurance, I'm a really slow painter. In the next video, I'll take this exact model and push it to a good tabletop standard. Not by completely repainting it, but just by making a number of tactical alterations, we can elevate the paint job considerably. Just one last thing, I just want to say thank you for watching. If you found this kind of breakdown useful, by all means consider subscribing, but more importantly, go and paint something. See you next time.